Hey guys, thanks for joining us for this 99th episode in Season 2 of Good Questions with Cameron Dole. Special guests on this episode include host of the Bleav in Sports Law on Bleav Podcast Network, founder and managing attorney at California sports lawyer Jeremy Evans will be visiting about the latest Supreme Court ruling against the NCAA. We'll also visit with actress, influencer, and podcast host Hayley Hasselhoff about her new podcast, Redefine You, a conversation for well-being. We'll also visit with iconic rocker Gary Numan about his new album, Intruder. Of course, if you would, please take the time to subscribe, comment, leave some feedback, check out the shop, and share with your friends. Now, some of us packed on a few pounds last year. Luckily, losing weight, or at least leveling off, is also possible. Now, here are 4 sneaky things that contribute to weight gain. Number 1, focusing too much on calories in, calories out. Now, the types of food matter too, not just how many calories you eat. A diet that's heavy in processed food will cause your blood sugar to spike and make you feel hungry all the time. Number 2, only snacking on unhealthy stuff. Now, there are healthy snacks too, like nuts. They've got a lot of more nutrition going on than what you'd get from a donut or a bag of chips. Remember, not every snack has to be your favorite thing in the world to eat. Number 3, eating vegetables, but the wrong kind. Try not to lean on starchy vegetables as much, like potatoes and peas. Non-starchy things like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, carrots, and mushrooms do a better job of making you feel full longer. And number 4, too much sitting around. The American Heart Association says we need at least 2 hours and 30 minutes of moderate exercise a week. For example, a 30-minute brisk walk 5 times a week. Now, even before the pandemic, only 20% of Americans were hitting that number. Sports attorney and friend of the show, Jeremy Evans. And first off, Jeremy, we got some information to talk about. It's always great to visit with you, my friend.
Oh, pleasure, and always honored and humbled to be with you, my friend. Thank you.
Now, Jeremy, this week, the NCAA rules on athlete compensation, that's all been thrown away, what everybody's kind of grown accustomed to. And Jeremy, I know there's a lot of misconceptions about what the Supreme Court ruling really says, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of discuss this and share with our listeners about the new guidelines, if you will.
No, thank you. Yeah, and pleasure to be with you. And so the NCAA decision, it was a 9-0 decision by the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday. And the narrow interpretation, according to the majority opinion, which is obviously 9-0, there's also a concurrent opinion that was issued by Justice Brett Kavanaugh. But I think Neil Gorsuch wrote the majority opinion. And essentially what it says is that schools, the NCAA and universities cannot limit the amount of scholarships that are given to their student athletes, or really just students in general. But most of what we're talking about is student athletes, because that's what schools would essentially compete for in this model, right? Although ideally, or conceivably, you could compete for non-sports students as well. Right. Mm-hmm. So what this does is it opens up an opportunity for schools to, mid-level schools, mid-major schools, schools across the country, that if they have a little extra money, they can offer some scholarship dollars to students. Now, does this mean that schools are going to go out and buy cars? No. Although conceivably there could be a situation where you and I might be talking a few years from now and it'd be like, well, such and such school got in trouble for providing a school to, XYZ athlete, right? So, and they could make the argument, it's in sort of a tongue-in-cheek way, that, well, transportation is required to get to school and they needed a car to get to school. But I think what this really means is that schools are going to be in a better spot to compete for students. So I think in that sense, it's a good thing. Now, the second piece to this, which is somewhat related but not talked about in the decision, is name, image, and likeness. And to me, with the state legislatures passing legislation on NIL, July 1st being this big date with regard to opening that up, the NCAA coming out and making a decision that they're not going to pursue NIL rules at this time, pursue a waiver for schools to do this. It is related because the Supreme Court, what they're essentially saying, the spirit of what they're saying is that they don't want schools limiting what athletes can make. And it might be a stretch to say that, but I think that these two things are somewhat related. But the main decision was schools can compete for students in terms of providing scholarship dollars.
You mentioned it there, name and likeness. One of the things that all of us gaming nerds always wonder about is, when is NCAA football going to be able to be realistic again?
Right. You know what? And that's a really good question. And it's funny because there was actually some talk of this prior to the NCAA Austin Supreme Court. And I think it was Notre Dame and a couple other schools that opted out of the EA Sports stuff. But to me, that's like one of the, obviously you're going to have your car dealerships and your potential for apparel deals, shoe deals, this sort of thing. You're going to have opportunities like that. But to me, if you could get into a situation where talk about how big esports is and how big gaming is, right? Like that's where the money is.
Right.
And if you got a situation where you get these college athletes, maybe let's say they take 50% or they take a percentage of the revenue or the fees, get a licensing fee. Mm-hmm. That to me is, I think, where the huge dollars are. And then of course, individual states set up rules as to how that looks for them. You can have, on one hand, California's model, which is basically open market, free market, do what you wish, just don't compete with the underlying university's deals. Meaning you can't wear Adidas on the field if they have a deal with Jordan or Nike, right?
Right.
But then you can take Georgia's model, which is completely different, which says, yes, you can do name, image, and likeness, but we're going to pool 74.9% of the money and give it to other athletes in the system that are not sort of high profile or not in the high profile sports. And then they also have a moral prohibition that is sort of, you can't sign up for deals like in the sin industry, so to speak, cannabis, alcohol, gambling, that sort of thing.
And we mentioned this is mainly for the sports, the athletes. Now, does this open doors for, like you mentioned, other ventures in school aside from sports?
I think so. I mean, I think the gambling, the alcohol, and the cannabis stuff is probably going to be off limits for all 50 states. I don't see that happening. I also don't see a federal law being passed. Mm-hmm. So that we have this, people often forget we have a constitutional republic, and all powers are pretty much reserved to the states, except for a few things for the federal government. And so I think for the most part, we're going to see 50 state laws. Some states may not even pass a law, but that doesn't necessarily mean that these students won't be able to do name, image, and likeness, because it's not the states that really determine that. I think California jumped the gun and got the conversation started by passing their Fair Pay to Play Act, but really this was the NCAA. Because if you want to be an NCAA member institution and you want to be an NCAA athlete, it's followed by their rules, no different than a country club, right? If you want to be a part of the country club, you got to follow the rules.
Right. But
I think there is a ton of opportunity here, to your point, tech investments, any sort of sports partnerships. There's a lot of startup companies, you can, as with any sponsorship or brand partnership, you can offer really three things. The first is straight up money, pay somebody to market a product on social media. The second is that you can offer a mix of product and money, mm-hmm. or, you can offer some sort of, equity in the company. And I've seen all three of those things done. And then, of course, the other thing I'll note about Georgia's law, which I forgot to mention, is that there's a year prohibition on you cannot take the money that you earn until a year after you graduate or a year after you leave school. And it's put like in an escrow account.
Now, Jeremy, for you, what do you think that with this being the federal passage, if some of the states do things different, do you think that gives an advantage or a disadvantage to a school as a result?
Yeah, that's a fair question. And I actually like it. I think competition is a good thing. To me, I think the thing that people often forget is that if let's say you and I are both athletic directors at, let's say that you're at a, major institution and I'm at a, small school in Mississippi. Well, let's say we're both going after the number one quarterback in the country. Now, normally the number one quarterback in the country is going to go to either a coastal school or a school in a big conference or what have you. But if me as a smaller school comes along and says, well, hey, we have this extra money from boosters, we don't have to compete. We can compete on the same level by offering more money or offering a better scholarship. I think that actually opens up some opportunities. And of course, if states want to pass NIL laws that are more beneficial than others, then that's okay. I mean, this happens in every other industry. If, for example, you want to sell a certain product in one state, or you want to have a certain business in one state, or certain businesses moving to a certain area of the country because it has better tax laws, that's okay. I think that's the legislature's prerogative, and I think ultimately students are going to choose. There's going to be, I guess, maybe kind of backing up a little bit, there's probably people are going to be surprised about how big and how small NIL is. Because on the larger side, you're going to have, yes, the top quarterbacks, running backs, starting five of a basketball team having, access to some serious NIL money. But it all comes down to social media. The athlete has to have an underlying social media account with a lot of followers. And this is where a lot of equity and parity comes in play by nature of the fact that you could have a top volleyball player at a school with 700,000 followers, and the starting quarterback could have 100,000. Well, that person with that 700,000 followers is going to have opportunity to make more money because the brands are paying based on how many followers and what your level of engagement is. So I think it actually opens up opportunities. I think competition is a good thing in this context.
And Jeremy, for you this last year, with everything being the way it has been as a sports attorney, has the landscape changed for you over these last 12 to 18 months?
What's funny is, it has changed, but I think with people being at home and spending more time at home with their families, I think they got to work more. They were able to focus more. So I've talked with a lot of business owners, and if you were set up to be digital or set up to be virtual in the first place, or at least had an online presence, I think that business may have actually increased for you. But it is interesting because what we've seen from the sports side is an acceleration in a lot of different things, an acceleration of moving sports to streaming and having more streaming opportunities when it comes to live sports. We've seen an explosion in sports documentaries, and there has definitely been a change. And of course, you look at the college football playoff, looking at ways to increase, its exposure and going from 4 teams to 12. We've seen the NFL add a football game, add a 17th game, and now they're thinking about adding an 18th game, and now they're thinking about adding a game in Germany, or even in Mexico City, where they do it every year. So I think we've kind of seen the move. I guess the two biggest takeaways would be the sort of mass move to virtual and digitalization and streaming. But then the other side of it is that this mass move of college sports to act more like professional leagues, where it be, not so much conference realignment, because that's already happened, but things like where you're talking about NIL, this NCAA decision, esports, gaming. A lot of the major schools in the country now have esports programs, and of course, those are not regulated by the NCAA. Similar to cheerleading, where since they're not regulated by the NCAA, cheerleaders have been making money off name, image, and likeness for years. It's not something that most people think about.
That's right. Now, Jeremy, the host of the Bleav in the Sports Law on the Bleav Podcast Network, tell our listeners what they can expect and more information about the podcast and the upcoming episodes you've got.
No, thank you. Yeah. So, as you know, as a fellow podcast host, I mean, it seems like, coming up with the creative and coming up with the ideas is always maybe the hardest part, right? And getting the right guest. And, I made a huge mistake on one of the recent episodes I did, I forgot to hit the record button. So I had this great guest on, and it didn't get recorded, but thankfully the guest was gracious enough to set up a time to re-record. But I guess for me, I'm really following this NCAA stuff. I mean, that's going to be interesting. I'm following the sports streaming. I'm following how a lot of the sports franchises are really, kind of turning themselves into like some serious like Wall Street players when it comes to investing and SPACs and all that stuff. And I also do, half my practice is entertainment. And so a lot of the stuff I do is with entertainment and streaming and content, some of the deals going on there. Obviously the Warner Brothers Discovery deal was a huge thing. Theaters coming back, and whether we're going to see a sort of combination between people watching, new movies from home, or whether they're going to get back in the theater. But I sort of have a hopeful idea that people will kind of get back to going to sporting events and all that. But those are kind of some of the things that I'm following, and, in the sort of coming weeks, we'll sort of see how that all shakes out. But it's just a very exciting time in entertainment and sports right now.
That's right. And again, check it out, the Bleav in Sports Law. It's you can find it on the Bleav Podcast Network. And Jeremy, it is always great to visit with you, brother. I appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule, and hope you have a great rest of your week. And we'll look forward to catching up again real soon.
No, looking forward to it. And when I make it out to Oklahoma, we'll have to go see a game and get together.
Now, back in March, Twizzlers started selling a new mystery flavor and challenged people to guess what it was. And if you guessed bean burrito, get your taste buds checked because you're way off. It's much lamer than that. Yesterday, they revealed on Twitter that the mystery flavor they've been teasing people with for months is actually raspberry. That's very different than original Twizzlers, which are strawberry flavored. Yeah, way to take a risk, right? Well, granted, raspberry Twizzlers actually sound like they might be good, while burrito Twizzlers do not. They will be available all summer if you want to try them. In other news, it looks like men and women have different approaches to this post-pandemic summer. Women are looking for a hot girl summer full of carefree fun, while men are looking to settle down with something long-term. According to a survey by Dating.com, 63% of men said they're looking for a serious relationship this summer. Just 37% of women are into that, while more than 60% say they plan to engage in hot girl summer, maybe with a fling or two. Now, I'm just spitballing, but perhaps single women found confidence in their independence during the quarantine, while men felt a stronger need to find a partner to go through the next tough time with. Got a new podcast that is going to premiere called Redefine You, a conversation for well-being. And from that, we've got Hayley Hasselhoff with us today. And first off, Hayley, I appreciate you taking some time to talk about the new podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, and how hard was it for you to grip the idea of the podcast, the subject material, and to be transparent and open with that idea? I mean, how hard was that in the early going, if you will?
Well, not hard at all, because I created it. It wasn't hard. Actually, this idea really got created on an Insta Live series that I projected at the beginning of lockdown. And it was this idea of speaking to friends of mine in the entertainment industry about their ownership of self, their mental health journey, and really kind of being able to give back our toolboxes to people who may be struggling with the fear of the unknown for the first time today. And now it's obviously translated into this beautiful podcast where we're still speaking to friends of mine in the entertainment world, speaking about their ownership of self, which hopefully starts to encourage you to start to look within and feel grounded in the power of you. We're also speaking to different experts and practitioners around well-being and wellness stigmas to really help you build your personalized toolbox. Because I think when we're all dealing with a struggle or a challenging day, the things that you have to revert back for is what's in your toolbox. And so if we can start to encourage you to find those things that work and walk alongside you through this life, then hopefully it'll be a good day of support towards our listeners.
And Hayley, when for you was it obvious to you that mental health was something that you had to really keep a grip on? When was it that you became self-aware of that, if you will?
I would say at a pretty young age. I've been in the industry as a curve model since I was 14 years old, and I kind of was put into this world of becoming a body activist for size inclusivity. And it wasn't until I would say a couple of years ago that I actually publicly came out about my mental health, but I feel like I was always thinking about mental health in some way, shape, or form through being a body activist, because the connectivity between our mental health and our body image walk hand in hand. And so for me, it's been a really long lifetime journey, and I think that's one of the biggest things I want to project onto this podcast is every guest that we have who comes on can showcase to you that they have struggled along the way as well, and that you have to struggle to be able to get to your triumphs, and that only makes you human. But we don't speak about it enough. We don't vocalize it enough within our friends or our family or publicly, because we have this fear of what people may think of us. So it's about having these conversations to not only help you feel more encouraged in your path, but also hopefully help to destigmatize the conversation so that we can more openly feel like we can take ownership by saying, yes, I deal with anxiety. Yes, I deal with social anxiety. Yes, I deal with depression, without feeling the fear of being able to speak up before it can go to something as a crisis.
Now, Hayley, how have you noticed from your supporters, the folks that give you feedback, how have you noticed their ideas on mental health being affected this last year? Have you seen people having a more reliance on mental health awareness, if you will?
Definitely. I mean, I would say that mental health has been on the rise, since this past year. One of the things that I think allowed us to feel a little bit more freer to speak about it in such a capacity like we are now is because we've all been dealing with a collective anxiety. The world has been dealing with a collective anxiety. And so it's freed this idea around anxiety in general and understanding each other and relating on a different level of knowing that it's okay to not be okay, and you're actually never alone in your struggles that you may fear. 1 in 5 adults in their lifetime will deal with a mental illness. And over 615 million people are suffering globally from mental health. So if you just look at the stats alone, you start to understand, why haven't we spoken about this sooner? Well, I think it starts with destigmatizing the conversation and also being able to showcase that it's okay to not be okay, and that doesn't define who you are, which is why, obviously the podcast is called Redefine You, because you can redefine yourself every single day, every moment in your life, and that you have the power to do that because it's your life that you're living.
That is right. And again, the new podcast is launching Redefine You, a conversation for well-being. And Hayley, I want to make sure and let folks know where they can keep up with the social media aspect of it, as well as catching up with the podcast as well.
Well, if you're looking to obviously tune in to Redefine You, a conversation for well-being, it's available on all podcast platforms. So whatever favorite podcast platform you go, it is there. If you are looking on social media, our hashtag is RedefineYouHH. And if you want to head over to my socials at H Hasselhoff, you're able to find out more about the upcoming episodes and all the behind the scenes.
Well, that's good stuff. And Hayley, I look forward to the new podcast. Check it out, Redefine You, a conversation for well-being. Hayley, hope you have a great rest of your week, and hopefully we can catch up again real soon.
Gorgeous. I hope so as well. Have a lovely day.
Now, this is a total marketing stunt, and I guess it worked, because here we are talking about it. Popeyes is testing out a new menu item called the I Don't Know meal for people who can't decide what to eat. It's specifically geared toward people in relationships who want Popeyes, but their partner doesn't know what to get. So when you ask and they say, I don't know, you can respond with, okay, great, I'll get you that then. The reason it's a gimmick is because the I Don't Know meal is just Popeye's most popular menu item, a chicken sandwich. And if you order online or through their app, you get one of their new premium lemonades for free. It's available for a limited time at participating locations. We've got the iconic iconic Gary Numan on the line with us, going to talk about his new album, videos, singles, all that as well. And first off, Gary, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Good to be here. Thank you.
Now, Gary, tell us the inspiration behind the new album, Intruder, that came out officially last month. A different sound, but for you, Gary, that's nothing surprising, is it?
I do try to move on with each record, yes. I do try to, just try to find sounds you've not used before and just keep evolving and just keep looking forward, rather than just repeating what you've done in the past. So that's the fun and the challenge of music. But with Intruder, the previous album, Savage, had a climate change theme to it, but it looks more at the human condition, should the worst happen sometime in the future. It's a little bit science fiction, I guess. Intruder is very different. Intruder looks at climate change from the Earth's point of view. If the Earth could speak, if it could, articulate the way it feels about us and what we're doing, what would it say? So that's what Intruder is doing. Intruder is the Earth speaking. And the idea I didn't know quite what to do when I started Intruder. I wanted to stay with the climate change theme because it still bothers me a lot. But I didn't quite know what to do. And then my daughter Echo wrote a poem when she was 11, I think, a few years ago now, called Earth, and that was about the planet speaking to the other planets and about how terrible people were and all the terrible things that we were doing and so on. And it was beautiful, and it was really nicely done. Showed lots of understanding and sympathy. But I took the idea with her permission and turned it into an album. So that's really how it came about. It actually came out of the mind of an 11-year-old.
And for you, does it always come different ways, and does it surprise you every time, the inspiration for the music?
It's a constant worry, actually. You do worry that you worry that every time. I think I've made 21 or 22 albums now in total over the years. It's a lot, and you do worry that you're not going to be able to write as the quality of tunes that you've written before, that you're going to write out of ideas. It's a constant. My confidence is fragile at best. I'm not particularly confident. And it always feels like it's crumbling at the edges slightly. So making an album is actually pretty stressful. Most of the time in the studio, you're worrying that you haven't done as good a job as you could do. Mm-hmm. You're always doubting yourself, which is a good thing, because it drives you to work hard and to really, really look at what you're doing and not be easily satisfied, I guess. But it is. You have those days where everything goes well, and you think, "Oh, great!" But that kind of makes up for the last 2 weeks where it wasn't going so well. But that's pretty much what it's like. You're kind of struggling forward, and you're kind of battling with your own confidence, really. And hopefully, at the end of all that, you've driven yourself hard enough, and you come up with an album that's worthy.
Now, Gary, this last year, as everybody's had time to themselves, I know that folks have seen maybe different ways of doing things, new inspirations. Did you have any new light bulb moments for you this last year?
I honestly didn't. No. Not as far as creating music is concerned, anyway. The album was 3/4 finished before the pandemic hit, so I was already deeply entrenched. In a way, I was already in my own bubble. I have a studio at home, so I wake up in the morning, go to the studio, come out at night, go to sleep, and repeat. For about 2 years, that's pretty much what you're doing. And so when the pandemic came along, I just carried on doing that. So I didn't need to change anything or adapt to it because, like I say, I got my studio at home anyway, so I was already immersed in that process. But when the album was finished, then things are very different. Normally when an album's finished, you immediately go out on tour, and that whole structure of how you have an album campaign has been established for decades. And that's what I've always done. I've been doing this 40-odd years now, and that's the way it's always worked. And, of course, you can't now. There was no tour initially when it first came out. Everything was cancelled. And so, doing everything on Zoom, I wasn't meeting people face-to-face. Wasn't going out, chatting to people the way I would have done before. So that was very, very different. So, yes, things were different when it was done. But the making of it, not really. Not really.
And as you have this one out now, like you said, different times than we've had before, does this maybe give you an opportunity to learn some new things for the next album release, if you will?
God, that would be good. I wish. I just thought I've been doing it so long, I kind of not sure there's much more I could learn, really. I've been doing this I'm quite old now. I've been doing this my entire adult life since I was a teenager, and I'm 63 now. So there probably is. There probably are things that I can learn, and I should be more open to it, I guess. But no, I feel like I'm pretty much sort of in a groove now. I am where I am.
That's right. And again, the album is Intruder. Gary, I always want to make sure and let our listeners know where they can find not only more information about the album, the videos, the singles, but also everything you've got going social media wise as well, sir.
Well, I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. I'm not particularly good with any of them. I've got a website that I've just given an Intruder update to. Yeah, I'm pretty bad at all that sort of thing. Actually, it's very one way as well. I'm very aware of. There's a lot of negative things that you can stumble across on social media. So I'm quite cautious in how I go about it, and I tend to put things on there, let people know what I'm doing. I don't look at comments. I don't look at feedback. It's not worth exposing yourself to some of that more negative stuff that's out there. But it's very useful, and it keeps people in touch with what you're doing. But like I say, it's very much a one-way street as far as I'm concerned. There's too many idiots out there just wanting to be negative about stuff. I've got no time for that. I want to enjoy the life that I've got.
The album Intruder. Gary Numan, it has been great to have some time with you, sir. I appreciate that. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and look forward to catching up again.
Thank you very much, Ben. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Well, thanks again for joining us for this 99th episode in Season 2 of Good Questions with Cameron Dole. If you ever have a comment, question, maybe anything else you'd like to know, you can hit me up on the contact page at gqwithcam.com. You can also find me on the socials, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook at GQWithCam. If you'd like to help out in the funding for this podcast, you can visit our merch store where we've got hoodies, shirts, stickers, tumblers, and mugs, and lots more. That's gqwithcam.com/shop. If you have a special guest idea, email me, gqwithcam@gmail.com. Well, thanks again to our good friend Brandon Allen for coming up with our theme music. We're going to let him play us out and hope you guys have a great rest of your Thursday.